Good evening. This is Dhaka Tribune editor Zafar Subhan, and I'm joined this evening by Haseen Jahan, the country director of Water Aid Bangladesh, Dara Johnston, chief of WASH UNICEF Bangladesh, and Alok Kumar Mojumdar, country director for the WASH Alliance program of the NGO Simavi. WASH in this context, of course, an acronym for Water, Sanitation and Hygiene. Welcome to our discussion, Period Talks, Pandemic and Beyond. We are here tonight on World Menstrual Hygiene Day to talk about menstrual hygiene in the time of Corona. Now, it is true that right now we are in the middle of a global pandemic that is garnering all the attention and concern, and rightly so, given the unparalleled danger it poses to global health. But it's also true that problems that pre-existed the pandemic sadly have not magically disappeared with the advent of COVID-19, and that have, in fact, in many ways, been made worse by the crisis. So it is with menstrual hygiene, long one of the underreported challenges facing girls and women in countries like Bangladesh. Tonight, we're here to discuss in general the scale of the challenge and what still needs to be done, but also the specific additional challenges posed by the coronavirus crisis when it comes to tackling this age-old problem. Ms. Jahan, why don't you start us off?
Thank you very much. This evening, I'll talk about menstruation. Are you getting a little bit, started feeling discomfort? Is it? I'm not sure, but I can assume that many of you already started feeling slightly discomfortable because this is the word you are not often used to hear from anyone. And when a girl, when a woman, when your sister, when your mother is talking about menstruation, it really matters to you and really shocks you sometimes. So let me start the discussion by stating you a few facts. So before, going to our discussion in depth around pandemic, let us share some of the statistics with all of you so that you understand where we are in this relation. First thing, that 50% and more than 50% people, women and adolescent girls of reproductive age, still using rags in our country. So you believe that it is true. And not only that, we are very proud of RNG workers and their foreign remittance in our country. And right now, more than 40 lakh RNG workers are there. Yes, and they cannot afford using sanitary napkins. Each sanitary napkin costs 5 taka to 15 taka, and they simply cannot afford it. And they have to work more than 8 hours, sometimes 12 hours and more, and they do overtime. Not only that, let's look at the picture of schools. Dara can add more on my one, but let me state at least one or two figures, like 30% students, girl students, they actually miss on an average 2.5 days per month because of early menstruation. And this really impacts their study, their result, their performance. So let me stop here and I'll come back to you once again when we start discussion. But I felt that this sort of statistics will be a good starting point to move around the points and we can discuss more around each of the issues.
Thank you so much, Haseen. I think you're absolutely right. The main problem we face here in Bangladesh, other countries as well, is, as you say, is the stigma which is attached. For many people, it is a very uncomfortable, very difficult conversation to have. It's quite unusual to have discussions such as we're having right now on platforms such as this. And that's the very first thing which we really need to overcome in order to resolve this issue. And I think the statistics which you have shared with us are truly shocking, because this is something we feel that, Bangladesh is moving towards being a middle-income country. We talk about the great economic and social advances we have made in the last 49 years, and we've made many advances, there's no doubt. But in a situation like that, to have still, more than 50% of girls and women in this country who are menstruation age not being able to have access to menstrual pads and other items such as that. That's really quite a shocking statistic, and I think is a good contextualization of where we are right now. Dara, if I could move to you now, could you pick up a little bit on what Hasin has said and take the conversation forward? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think what we have to realize is the underlying problem here is empowering women. People have said it before. I'm not saying this is not an original statement, but if men had periods, this problem would be solved a long time ago. The fact that it is women and girls means that it's not been addressed at all, and especially in a country like Bangladesh. But there are, as you say, there's a lot of development happening in Bangladesh, and there have been some positive achievements. If we look over the past 4 or 5 years, there are some gains made, but there's still a long way to go. If you see in 2014, only 36% of girls knew about menstruation when they had their first period. In 2018, we see it's moved up to 53%, but still, it is a huge number of girls who don't know what's happening when they first menstruate. In 2014, 40% of girls said they missed school. In 2018, it had gone down to 30%, but still, 30% is a huge number. So many of these figures show us that what we are doing is helping to solve the problem, but we still have a long way to go. And the main reason we want to achieve this is for the dignity and the human rights of women, and so that they can have their dignity and health. It affects, in fact, it affects 6 of the SDGs. It's involved with SDG 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, and 12. So good health and well-being, education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, decent work, and sustainable consumption. All of these are affected by the fact that we still have these many challenges. And I think in the time of this pandemic, I think the phrase that's been put around today is that periods don't stop in a pandemic. In fact, the situation gets worse. There is the discomfort of lockdown, where people don't have the room, they don't have the privacy and the dignity. There is also the challenge. Hasin mentioned the economic challenges, but now people are facing even more economic challenges. So this leads to even more problems, being able to afford and being able to access. And then there's the challenge of, as I mentioned earlier, girls not knowing about the menstruation. So now that we have the pandemic, there is even less access to information. So the challenge is exacerbated by the pandemic, and also by the recent cyclone which occurred. So these just multiply the problem.
Yes, thank you, Dara. I mean, I think it's a great contextualization when you mentioned that 6 of the SDGs, in fact, touch upon this one matter, and that that if we fail to deliver on this one issue of menstrual hygiene, that in fact, in a one fell swoop, 6 of the SDGs are not being fully fulfilled. I mean, I think that really is a great way of contextualizing this for people who are who are relatively new to the subject and perhaps don't quite understand the import of what we're talking about. And I think talking about menstrual hygiene as a human right is a really great way of sort of looking at this issue. We all talk about health as a human right, but how menstrual hygiene is inextricably linked to the right to health. And as you mentioned, it's not just the right to health, it's many other things as well. The right to a decent work environment, that is also implicated here. So that's a great point. Alok, if I could bring you in at this point, if you could just perhaps start us a little bit, talking a little bit about the general issue. And then once we've heard your opening comments, we can circle back and talk a lot about what Dara has just touched on a little bit, which is in this specific age of coronavirus, how has the problem been made worse? And how can we perhaps address those specific challenges which are being caused by the current crisis we're all in? So over to you, Alok.
Thank you very much, Jafar Bhai, and for inviting me in this today's Menstrual Hygiene Day observations talk. First of all, I pay full respect to all mothers and girls, those who menstruate every day. Over 25 million people, women and girls in Bangladesh menstruate every month. So it's a huge community we're talking about. The situation already explained by two speakers. I can only add some issue on menstrual hygiene, health management in a school. You see that 22% school has the water facilities, soap facilities, and the room for changing the pads, and only 6% school toilets has bin to dispose the sanitary pads. Over 42% women are not allowed to conduct their religious activities during the administrations, and even they cannot dry up their menstrual pad into the open sunlight. So a lot of stigma is around on this menstrual hygiene management. It looks like a secret issue. We need to break this silence. This menstrual hygiene is not related only the men or women. I think this is also related to the humanity, because if a woman does not menstruate, we cannot get a generation. So it has a direct relation with reproductive health. So therefore, we have to provide a very good importance on this menstrual hygiene management. And Bangladesh government is also keen. They are trying to, its local government division is trying to develop a menstrual hygiene management strategy, which will provide us a guidance. This pandemic, COVID pandemic, yes, I agree with Zara that is really multiply the problems. As you know, recently the UN Women has published a report called Rapid Gender Analysis. That report says that 57%, almost 58% women says that they don't have the accessibility of hygiene kits and sanitary pads during this COVID situation. And 42% they say they don't have the accessibility of soap and other facilities to make more hygienic. So this COVID situation really is pushing back our women and girls to get access, to get proper hygiene facilities, to proper menstrual hygiene management. And also the COVID situation also create another problems, because their workload has increased at the domestic level. And in our working area, I have seen that some domestic violence also increased during the COVID, which is really aggravating the problem to have a proper hygiene management at the household level. So altogether, this COVID pandemic really is impacted on the menstrual hygiene management situations. So I'll stop now. I'll come back again if I got time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alok. Haseen, if I could go to you. So I think it's been very eloquently stated by all three of you that this is actually making things much worse, and one would imagine that that would be the case. And when we talk about sort of menstrual hygiene, it's not just a question of accessibility and affordability. What I'm understanding, talking to the three of you, is that there's a whole ecosystem around this which needs to be developed. So for instance, if you're talking about schools, it's not just enough to provide pads to girls. What they also need is they need gender specific toilets, so where they can go and actually have access. They need waste bins where they can throw things. So there's a whole bunch of things which may not occur to the layperson that you actually need to put in place. Alok has also mentioned in terms of, you need a place to dry them, access to sunlight. if you're using cloths, for instance. So there are all of these issues which are there. And now that everyone is stuck at home, that is making things much more difficult. And also, as Alok has also mentioned, is that the workload of girls and women has also increased. And I mean, this is, I think, regrettable, but I think it's also an inescapable fact. So this being the case, what do you think can be done? What might solutions perhaps be in this? Let's initially talk a little bit, now that the conversation has moved to the problems at this particular point in time with coronavirus, and then we can step back near the end of this discussion and talk about the bigger picture. But right now, in this particular crisis, what can perhaps be done, do you think, in terms of solutions which could help people?
Okay. Before pointing out the solutions, let me give you a real life scenario, what is happening.
Yes, of course. Good.
Yeah. WaterAid undertook an online survey. I mean, not really survey, online rapid assessment. And we tried to undertake a few case studies on different girls at different socioeconomic strata. So one of the story came very appealing, that a garments worker, he's a man, and he has one wife and two daughters, and two of them kind of menstruating almost at the same time. And they are not getting, paid from their factory. So they're running out of money, and the first cart is going for the sanitary napkins. So when the mother is going back to the practice of using clothes, where they are still trying to help the girls to use the sanitary napkins. So you can think that family itself is very much interested to provide the facilities or support to the children, but still they are unable to do it because of the money. Another interesting story came out from another case study, that the young lady, she started taking pills not to menstruate. So that is another consequence, that she is taking pills for more than 2 months continuously, so that she will not menstruate. So these are the real life situation what is happening at slums, because at that period, and even now, they cannot go out, and they cannot kind of buy things, and they don't have money. So one of the things we should take it very seriously, that when we design our relief package, we must include soap and sanitary napkins. Be that the pandemic like COVID-19, Amphan. So for all sorts of disaster, women suffer more, and they need it. This is a basic right. They should get it.
I think that's absolutely right. If the government and the authorities and NGOs as well, those providing relief, understand it is a basic right, as basic as food, which it is.
Absolutely.
That should be the mindset.
Mindset, yeah.
Yes, got it. Dara, and have you do you see, in terms of relief packages, is this something that could actually be done? Is it something you're seeing being done? I mean, you're with UNICEF, so is that something which you've put on the agenda?
Yes, in the emergency situations, we have always endeavored to provide the most disadvantaged people with either what's called hygiene kit or a dignity kit, so that they can have sanitary pads and soap and so forth. But this is usually at the beginning of an emergency. But as it progresses, it becomes more and more difficult, either financially or logistically, to continue to provide these services. And the pandemic now has been going for 8-9 weeks or more, and of course the cyclone added to those problems. So it's not always practical and feasible to continue to provide services like this. But I think that one solution, one area where we might find a solution where the most disadvantaged and most at-risk members of the population can be assisted is by engaging with the private sector.
Okay.
Alok mentioned the 25 million women and girls every month they menstruate in Bangladesh. So there is a very Haseen was saying that only 50% of them actually use sanitary napkins. So there is a huge market potential there. But in order to access this market, I think the private sector should also take on the responsibility of ensuring that the most disadvantaged have access, using the various NGOs and other community organizations to reach the most disadvantaged with assistance, because there's huge profit to be made from this market. I think a rough calculation, you're talking about 3 or 4 billion napkins or more every year. That's a huge industry. So there's great potential there, and I think that the private sector should be engaged to support the various aspects of providing these kind of services, developing the facilities, improving facilities at schools, and making them affordable to the poorest.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, the statistics, which I think is, again, to a layperson such as myself, which is very surprising, is that Haseen mentioned, we have 4 million garment workers, but yet even within that industry, the prevalence of the use of sanitary napkins is very low. Did you say it was below 50% even among them, Haseen?
Yes.
RMG workers, and and of course, one of the upshots of this is that a lot of people take time off of work, and I think that's something Alok mentioned as well, either off of school or off of work, so then they become less productive. So there's a great incentive here for factory owners, in fact, to make these services and these products available to their employees. They would be very, I would think, prime partners in initiatives, working with the government, working with the NGOs, making sure, perhaps subsidizing sanitary napkins for their workers. I mean, that could be a very good place to start. You've got 4 million women, largely, I think it's 90% plus of the RMG workers in Bangladesh are women. By definition, I would hope, would be of age of menstruation. So right there, if that is something where we could have a partnership, a tripartite partnership between the factory owners, NGOs, and government, I think that would be a great place to start. And then maybe that could be something that could be expanded. Alok, if you could talk a little bit about Dara's idea of trying to engage with the private sector and how we might do that more fruitfully. Alok, I think your microphone is off, so if you could just turn it on.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think Dara rightly mentioned that private sector has a great role in this improving this menstrual hygiene situation and supplying chain of this sanitary pad. Perhaps you know that our many of the local NGOs and they have the program on entrepreneurship development. The local entrepreneurs, they're developing the local entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs are producing low-cost sanitary napkin and supplying to this low-cost, low-income community, in the slum areas. So the low-income community people have access to these sanitary pad. And number two, in case of long-term activities, we should have a long-term plan so that the government can encourage these entrepreneurs, the private sectors, by reducing taxes, VAT on this sanitary pad. And government already reduces VAT, but unfortunately, the result is not getting at the ground. We don't see the reduction of cost of the sanitary pad, though government has reduced VATs on some materials, imported materials on sanitary pad. However, we should have a comprehensive plan for reducing VAT and tax so that the sanitary pad could be available in affordable price. And also government could provide some loan to the local entrepreneurs in a low interest so that local entrepreneurs can produce lead napkin and they can be part of the supply chain of the sanitary pad. And at the
Yeah.
same time, we should have a big awareness program to break the silence. We need to break the silence because of ministration is a pride. Ministration is not shame. We have to consider this as a pride because of if we do, if my mother don't ministrate, no question I will be here. So therefore, we should consider this ministration as a pride. So this kind of awareness raising we should continue, and also we should encourage the private sectors and low cost sanitary napkin producers, local entrepreneurs, and also reducing tax and VATs on these sanitary pads final production so that the people can get it in affordable price.
Okay, yes. So thank you, Alok. And I think another area, and you had also touched on this in your earlier statements, is perhaps at schools. And building on Dara's point where he said during emergency times, they think in terms of having hygiene kits, and that's or dignity kits, and that's a key component of a relief package during emergency times. Also, it occurs to me that we think in terms about providing children, or certainly once they, let's say teenagers, when they reach a certain age, in terms of school books. Perhaps when we think in terms of what needs to be provided to girls to go to school, it's not just providing them with books. It's not just providing them with pencils. It's not just providing them with uniforms. Maybe this could also be part of their school kit. And of course, when we talk about the facilities at schools, again, and this is something which Alok had also mentioned, that the facilities perhaps need to be taken into consideration, because where you have the absence of girls' bathrooms, girls' toilets, where you have the absence of bins, then of course this fundamentally affects the ability of teenage girls, at least, to be able to attend school. And so that should be part of the planning process. But I want to come back, Haseen, if I may, to a point which Alok had made, and I think that's really what I'd like to center this discussion on. When he talks about awareness, and to really break down the stigma. And this was, in fact, the point you started this discussion with. And one of the statistics which you have shared is that so many, maybe it was actually Dara who shared this, so many of the young girls reach their first menstruation without really being aware of what it is. And so that suggests to me that there's there's only so much we can really do in terms of, when you say you bring in the government, you bring in the private sector, you bring in NGOs. This is really a family issue, you see. So how do we raise that awareness in the family, saying that this is not something to be ashamed of, this is not something which should have stigma associated with it. And a very real example of this is this has got to be something you can talk about. Because if you can't talk about it, that's falling at the very first hurdle. So and obviously this is something which organizations such as yours must have been struggling with for many years. It's not, I'm sure it has occurred to you, but it seems that it's a continuing struggle. So tell me, how do you address that issue and move forward on that?
I will tell that, but before that, I would like to build on Dara's and Alok's point on sanitary napkin issues and the VAT issue.
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah. In fact, WaterAid is lobbying for reduction of VAT from sanitary napkins for law. So what happened last year, 30th of June, SRO, a government circular, has been published, which says that the raw material or imported material, they waived the tax from the imported materials. Those are needed for preparing sanitary napkins, but it didn't have any impact on the price, as Alok was mentioning in his point. What happened in real sense? When a pad is produced, if you start calculating from the raw material to the end product, 128% additional tax VAT is imposed on the actual cost of production.
Right.
So we have a straightforward idea that the producers are making a huge amount of profit. It's not like that. This is number one. The second point, even if the tax, or that is called supplementary VAT, SD in their language, supplementary duty, even that is waived, the net impact is equal to 0.15 taka, that is 15 paisa per packet. So it makes no difference on the whole issue. So when government is taking this sort of decision, this means that government has positive intention to support this sector, this issue, this agenda. But what is happening? The government may not have the right kind of information to take the decision, and it is our duty to make the right decision, information available to them. So what government can do? If you consider it that the chain, you will find that at the end of the chain, when the product, I mean the pad, is going to be sold, it has 15% VAT for sale. If the government waives this 15%, the entire price will be reduced to a much affordable limit. So this is one way we can make this affordable. The second point I'll pick on Dara's point, that private sector has huge potential for business. For example, if in Bangladeshi home, there are two types of rice. One is premium rice, which are very fancy, high cost, high quality perfumed rice, which rich people used to eat. And there are normal rice at lower price, 10 taka, OMS price. So you can even think of the business persons or the private sector can think of a luxurious product and a generic product. So for generic product, they can waive the VAT 100%. For luxurious product, they can make business out of that. They can double it. So this sort of progressive system should be adopted, and that is my specific recommendation from this forum. And I think this should be noted. And let me stop here regarding the VAT and tax issue, and picking up from your point regarding how to build awareness among the students, among the family. The issue should start from your own home. So I always say, I used to say that, am I talking to this with my son? If Dara is talking to it with his daughter, and if we start talking to it with our children, then things will be spreading. Likewise, it is happening also in schools. We found that teachers feel kind of not comfortable with the topics, or they are not comfortable with what is written and how to teach. So many efforts are already made so far to enhance their capacity, how to teach, and developing different teaching materials. And UNICEF is very, forefront in doing so. So now gradually things are changing. In schools, they are also started teaching, but maybe not at the expected level. It will take more time. And the last thing, we should have to concentrate on different media. So media has a role. And if you can recall, Senora has, and some other sanitary napkin and several private sector had very good and appealing and touching advertisement, which really played a very, good, impression in our minds. So that can actually bring changes in the society.
Okay, and you mentioned earlier that you said that because of the changes which had made to VAT, that suggested to you that the authorities are trying to do the right thing. You see, but perhaps they just need a little bit more information.
More information and more push, and that push should not be only from us. It should be a concerted effort. It should be from UNICEF, it should be from SIMAVI, it should be from menstrual hygiene management platform, and it should be from Dhaka Tribune. Why not?
Yeah, well, we do try and spotlight the issue when we can. I just want to bring in a comment which I just saw, just flashed on the screen a second ago. The commenter was suggesting that vending machines might be a way to go, and if you could introduce them in schools, so that goes a long way towards it. It solves two problems. Here's the comment again. It solves two problems. One, the availability is there, but two, because it's also there and it's very visible, that would also help in terms of destigmatizing, in breaking down the stigma surrounding the issue. So that seems to me as not a bad idea. I'm sure they have it in many other countries, but perhaps that's something we could have here. Dara, what do you think? Have you seen things like this perhaps in Europe?
Yes, I mean, the vending machines are very popular, very convenient. They're also very useful because of the unfortunate stigma. You find
right, that's it. The thing is, you get to
places,
see it, yeah.
I have experience of a project actually in neighboring India, where the vending machine installed in the school ended up providing for the whole community, because, as we found out later, the women and girls did not like to go to the pharmacy because it was a man who was serving.
There you go. That's another advantage, I should say.
They felt very embarrassed to ask for this. But it doesn't have to be that they have to have a vending machine. I think we should really start to address the taboos and the social stigma of menstruation, so that it's not such a challenge for women to go and buy in the supermarket or wherever they want to buy. I notice here when someone buys sanitary napkins in the supermarket, they're placed in brown paper bags, as if it's something that's has to be kept secret.
Right.
So it really shouldn't be that way, and it should be easier for women to buy sanitary napkins.
Yeah, good. And Alok, if I could bring you in, can you hear me? You were having trouble hearing me before. Okay.
I'm hearing you now.
Very good.
You're clear.
So if I could, you wanted to talk about this in the context of schools, and I think again this is, that could be a really great place to start there. If I could just over to you, Alok, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we should have a very good plan and also a comprehensive plan from the national level in order to address the problems of menstrual hygiene management. The issue already discussed, I'm not going that. I want to bring another issue on the table. That is my question. How far we are arranging the menstrual hygiene management friendly toilets in our workplaces? That is a very good question. A very important question, because we have seen a lot of female workers are nowadays going to the office, but they do not have the facilities at their offices to use the toilet. So that has to be taken into consideration. We must have a very good MHM friendly toilet at the office, so that our female colleagues can use with the dignity, with the privacy. That has to be taken care of. I hope in the menstrual hygiene management strategy that point will be taken care of. And at the school level, the Ministry of Education already issued circular to establish the menstrual hygiene corner at the school and conduct the menstrual hygiene education at the school level. But the study of National Hygiene Survey 2019 has revealed that only 50% of the girls say that their schools are conducting this session. Means 50% of schools are not conducting these menstrual hygiene educations at the school level. So therefore, we have to take care of proper implementation of this circular, which is being already issued by the Minister of Education and Education Department. As a whole, we need a comprehensive plan for awareness raising, as well as availability of facility at the doorstep of the users. Last point I would like to mention at this, the dispense of this sanitary pad. It is very difficult for a girls or woman, a village woman, to buy a sanitary pad from the medicine shop, because this kind of sanitary pad mainly sold in the medicine shop, which and most of the medicine shops seller are young boys. Are also a lot of people surrounding him, and people, the women and girls feel shy to buy it from that shop. Therefore, we have to have a kind of system where we can make this sanitary pad available so that the girls and women can easily come and buy this sanitary pad. I think that will be a great help to our women and girls. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think what strikes me talking to all three of you here is that there should be market solutions to all of these, because where you have a demand and where you have a need, and we're talking about a product which someone can make money off of by producing and selling, you would expect that they would be able to actually feed that demand. So for instance, there's a lot more with we have like online purchasing or delivery purchasing. So maybe a system such as that could be integrated into this solution. And I mean, I think more and more people are using delivery services for groceries. So perhaps someone could come up with a delivery service focused on this particular product. And, maybe it'd be a delivery service largely staffed by women delivery people. I'm not sure if that would make things more simpler or more agreeable. Haseen, I want to talk about one thing here, and that you can't help but notice, a panel of four of us here, with three of the people on the panel are men. And nevertheless, I think actually it is important to bring men into the conversation, because I think this is typically, as Dara had pointed out, he said that, look, if this was something which men had to deal with, okay, it would have been solved a long time ago. It's clearly a function of the fact that this is a problem which is seen as a woman's problem. So to what extent can we bring men into the conversation? We're talking about at the family level. And is that something, and maybe even at the school level, that you think would be a useful way of addressing and destigmatizing the situation and the issue surrounding menstrual health and menstrual hygiene?
Absolutely, Jafar Bhai. Actually, when we started discussing this menstrual hygiene issues back in, say, 15 years, so we were shy, to be honest. And we at that time, when we went for school sessions, we tried to limit the discussion with only, female teachers and students, and that's all. Gradually, we understood that if we limit with the girls and only the female teachers, this will not, come up with desired solution. Then we gradually try to address the male teachers as well. So now we are addressing both male and female teachers. And when we go to community, we are addressing all the male counterparts also, because they are the decision makers. When they have to go for purchasing pad, actually at rural household, the male person is to go to market and he is to purchase things. So he is the decision maker and money is spent by him. So he should be brought into the discussion and he should understand the issue and give importance to that issue. So it is really, really important to engage the male counterpart at everywhere and bringing male in every discussion. And this should be treated as a general issue, not the issue of a woman only.
Yes. And I think one thing which is interesting, and this is to speak to a point Alok raised, on the one hand, we're trying to destigmatize the issue, and I think it is very important to educate people and build awareness around that. But at the same time, we should also be sensitive to the fact that people may feel a little shy and embarrassed. And, it's very well to say, okay, well, you shouldn't stigmatize it. But if people do feel that they are uneasy buying this from a young man or a boy in a store, that's also something which needs to be respected to a large extent. We need to work within the sort of the social ecosystem we have. Dara, is that something which, perhaps that's a bit of a difference between countries in South Asia and in countries, let's say, in Europe, which is where you're from? I'm not sure if you think that that's something which we should take into consideration when you formulate our policies, to try and work to some extent with the culture while at the same time trying to break down the stigma?
Certainly, it's going to take time, maybe even generations before it's something that's considered normal. But we have to take serious efforts to try to change this and try to change it as quickly as we can. Education in the school, but also in the home. It needs to be talked about. It needs to be not seen as something which is a taboo or undignified. It needs to be discussed openly and with both boys and girls, and it should be part of the school curriculum. And it's definitely a worry. Look, mentioning that only 50% of the respondents in the survey said they had received the teaching. And I wonder, was that survey just for girls? So did the boys not receive any teaching in this subject? So that's something that has to be addressed, and it will take time. So we need to find ways to provide these the services to women and girls while still trying to change people's attitudes and change the social norm.
Okay. Now, Alok, a point I'd like to bring you in here. There's a point you made right in your opening comments where you also mentioned that with the religion we have here in Bangladesh, that also there's a mindset that you are considered unclean, and could you expand on that a little? And is that something which it's possible to work with religious leaders on, perhaps? Because I would imagine that goes a long way to demystifying and destigmatizing the situation. I'm not sure if that's if that's something which we can address.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, this is a lot of stigma is prevailing regarding this menstrual hygiene management. One of them is that they refrain from doing religious activities. It's a good number of women. And also one of the stigma is that during the ministrations, they don't allow them to eat more protein like fish, eggs, meat. Whereas this is on the contrary to this is very important for her to eat fish, meat, fish during the menstruation, because a lot of blood is going and she needs more nutritious foods, more protein food. But
Yes.
the stigma is preventing them to have this kind of food. We need to break this stigma. And as Dhara is mentioning, I fully agree with him. That is, this stigmatization is required time by generation. But we have to start at some point. In our program, we have a kind of education of the religious leader. While we are educating in the community, we are also educating imams and the priests and other religious leaders, so that they can also understand the situation. And I'm very hopeful the situation is gradually is improving. And a lot of religious leaders nowadays, they're also allowing our women to participate in the religious activities. So we have to continue the educations with the different channel and different group of people, so that we can bring all the people in the same message, same voice, that we need to break the silence. And that really is important, to have a common message in a different channel regarding this menstrual hygiene stigma. And then it will really will help. And also at the household level, we have to have a lot of responsibility as a parents. We have to have a lot of and we have to educate our children about the puberty age, the problems of the puberty age, বাংলা যেটাকে বলে বয়সন্ধিকাল. So we have to have a lot of education on that, so that the children can learn from the households as well. So this is very important to continue this education into the all level to break this silence.
Okay. Haseen, can I bring you in at this point?
Not really, but I want to add something else that I mean, from a long time, we always talk about um, disposal issues, that the safe
Yes.
disposal of pets. So it remains a question. But my feeling is that we hardly thought of thinking differently. I mean, but whether was a possibility for producing biodegradable sanitary napkins at affordable cost, did we invest enough for that sort of research and development, and whether it is a possibility? Because so far we know that there are examples of that sort of pads, and ICDTRB already developed that. And some of the pads were also developed from water hyacinth, which is very much available in Bangladesh. And some low-cost pad from jute, that is coming from garments factory.
Yeah.
Low-cost napkins from Ella pad. So there are options coming up from different R&Ds. So we should put more emphasis on this sort of R&D activities. And another factor we never factored in, that is how this is being managed by persons with having disabilities.
Yes.
So really difficult, and I have my personal fascination of working with them, and I often has a request from them that whether we can think of developing pad, something like diaper, or that can be panty that can be pulled up, something like that. And we never made any investment for that sort of research development, or putting attention for those groups of people. So I think time has come that not only for women, we should also consider how persons with disability will have dignified life. So that is my last point to discuss here.
Okay, no, and that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There's no reason that, we can't innovate and really look at what kind of different products. Biodegradability makes a lot of sense. It doesn't seem that there's any reason why that couldn't be a widespread solution, and certainly something that takes into account the special challenges and problems women with disabilities might face in this area is something that deserves a lot of attention. Dara, that leads me to sort of a thought I've read in other countries, for instance, and even though it might be sort of initially thought to be problematic, but in India, for instance, they've had certain success with menstrual cups. Could that be a possible solution, you think, here in Bangladesh, looking at it from, you work for the UN, so perhaps you've seen good solutions in other countries similar to Bangladesh. As I mentioned, I know there's some programs in India, and I'm sure elsewhere in Asia as well. Is that something you think might be a possibility for Bangladesh?
Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I mean, it would have to be a choice. I mean, women in Bangladesh have moved from using cloths to using sanitary pads, and this would be another step. If it's not something that's entirely widespread in Western countries at the moment, but it's beginning to become more popular. It seems to be more convenient, and it certainly has much less environmental impact, because the disposal of napkins is a huge challenge. So this is something definitely, as we move forward, that we could see being available. I'm not sure if it is available at the moment in Bangladesh. Maybe Haseen knows, but I think my experience has been in Bangladesh, if there's a demand, the private sector will provide for that demand. So I think it's something that certainly would make a difference.
Yeah, super. Now, I think we just have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask everyone to just make a short closing comment and sort of round out the discussion. Alok, let me start with you, if I may. If you could, your mic.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
thank you. Yes.
I would like to invite everyone to join in this journey, this campaign, MSM issue. This is issue for all. So please try to come up and help from your angle so that we can really bring a better world for tomorrow. And the last point I like to address on is this is the biodegradable issue of sanitary pad. Yes, we need a biodegradable sanitary pad, and one of the Dutch NGO is working with our local partners to develop this kind of biodegradable sanitary pad. But of course, it is new products, are costly. But we at the same time we have to have our available sanitary pad to the users so that they can really improve their menstrual hygiene management situation. So overall, I will really be part of this campaign and be part of this journey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Alok. Seeing we're almost out of time, so you have just one or two words as a sort of closing statement. That would be great.
Okay. This pandemic cannot stop menstruation, so let us make pad affordable to all females. And this is a basic need for every female of reproductive health age. And for example, when we buy something which is essential, like salt or rice, we don't pay VAT. Then why should we pay VAT for sanitary?
I think that's a great place to finish up. And Dara, if you could just have a final comment.
Yes, maybe I can mention one issue that wasn't mentioned throughout the talk, is that we are together with UNICEF and various sector partners. We're developing a MHM strategy, which will enable us to address almost all of these issues, including the VAT issue, working together with the government. And so this will give us a sort of a roadmap so that we can hopefully achieve all that we're talking about this evening.
Okay, well, thank you. And thank all three of you. I mean, this has been a very interesting discussion. I want to also thank the viewers who've taken the time to tune in, to listen to this very important issue. And I think in conclusion, all I would like to say is that, of course, we're talking about this on International World Menstrual Hygiene Day, but this conversation shouldn't end here. And as Haseen has, of course, pointed out, those of us in the media, we have a great role and responsibility to play here. So I certainly, I and my colleagues will do what we can to keep this issue in the public eye. I think the more we talk about this, the more we destigmatize it, the more we let people understand that this is an issue which touches the lives of each and every one of us. It's not just a women's rights issue. This is a human right issue, and all of us have a stake in addressing it. Dara made the point that no less than 6 of the SDGs are implicated with this one issue. If we don't solve this one problem, we're not going to be able to fully meet our commitments to up to a half dozen SDGs, which is something which a country like Bangladesh is certainly committed to and is dedicated to. And as we become wealthier, as we advance socially, as we advance economically, it's absolutely crucial that we address this issue as well. So thank you very much. Thank you to our viewers. I hope you have found this as interesting, enlightening, and informative as I have. And let's continue this discussion when we get, let's continue this discussion tomorrow, the next day, and in the weeks, months, and years to come. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.